How you doing? This is George Whitten. It is April 3rd, 2024. The title of this episode is Earthquakes, Quds Day, and Imminent War. This episode is going to be jam-packed. We're talking about the earthquake that just took place in Japan. We're talking about Quds Day. We're talking about the last day of Ramadan. We're talking about how Israel just assassinated an Iranian general along with a bunch of heads of terrorists at an Iranian consulate in Damascus. We're going to talk about how ISIS called for attacks. Israel receives bomb, and there's going to be a Red Heifer update. There's a lot to cover. Last night, there was a major earthquake that hit Taiwan, and then there's tsunami alerts that went all over the place. It was a very significant earthquake. It was a 7.4. But along with the 7.4, there were another 43 earthquakes in the area. And over 20 of them were right at 5. And 5 or greater. Now, let me try to explain the Richter scale. Because what people don't understand is that earthquakes are, the Richter scale is exponential. So this is just a chart. Whenever you hear a 5 or greater, a 5 on a Richter scale is like an atomic bomb that blew up over Nagasaki. A 4 is like a small atomic bomb. A 5 is like the bomb that took out the Japanese city. As you go up, you'll see that this is actually the seismic energy equivalent to the amount of TNT. So from a 5, which is 32 kilotons, to a 6, it's a megaton. To a 7, it's 32 megatons. Okay? And as you get larger and larger, you get to a 7.1, it's 50 megatons. 7.5, 178 megatons. And 8 is a gigaton. So the reason why I bring this up is because yesterday that earthquake was such a significant earthquake. It was a 7.2, but then every aftershock afterward was like an atomic bomb going off. And so you really need to keep that in prayer. And if you actually watch the earthquake USGS site, you could see that all along the Ring of Fire there were earthquakes. So it was a very significant day yesterday. Now, this week started out very interesting. On Friday of last week, we reported how the United States was sending weapons to Israel. And this was a very, kind of a tumultuous week with Israel. But what's interesting is they were sending off 1,800 2,000-pound bombs and 500 500-pound bombs. And then along with that, another 25 F-35 fighter jets and engines. So it was actually a very significant thing that happened last week that was reported. But then on Monday, Israel, allegedly Israel. Now, Israel hasn't claimed responsibility, but pretty much everyone knows that Israel took out the Iranian General, Reza Zahedi. And when he took him out, it happened at an Iranian consulate. So this was a very interesting dynamic because now we took out several heads of Islamic Jihad. They took out the Iranian general. And then the following day, we reported how Axios actually reported originally how the U.S. told the Iranians, hey, we didn't know anything about it. And according to the article that we covered, Axios reported several Israeli and American officials that said, hey, listen, Israel told us within minutes, and they didn't tell us they were going to hit in a consulate. And so basically, Israel just did not care what America thought. So I find this interesting because the dynamic, this shift that's happening with Netanyahu and Biden is getting much, it's becoming more and more apparent. Now, as this is happening, a lot of Israeli consulates and a lot of U.S. consulates were actually not even being used because of the heightened security alert and the heightened, attacks that were coming. And at the same time that this is happening, U.S. and Israeli flags are being burned all over, Tehran and different parts of the Middle East. So it was a very interesting dynamic that's taking place. Now, this Friday is really the gearing up for everything. I mean, everything is gearing up this Friday, and that's the reason why I'm putting out this alert. This Friday is Quds Day. And for those that don't know, this is actually known as the International Quds Day. It's a Persian holiday, meaning an Iranian holiday. And it was developed in Iran in 1979, shortly after the Iranian Revolution. So this is a Shiite holiday that was bunkered on. Now, there is another day called Al-Quds Day. And Al-Quds Day is the day that Israel became a nation. That is on May 15th, 1948 every year. This happens to be Quds Day, and this is always celebrated the last Friday prayers of Ramadan each time Ramadan happens. So it's a different year or a different day every year. And so now there's a call to actually, hey, this is the last day of Ramadan. So there's going to be people that are going to be gathered. Now, for those that don't understand the dynamics inside Jerusalem, this last week there will be Muslims. There will be tens of thousands of Muslims that are taking their tents up to the Temple Mount, and they're actually camping on the Temple Mount complex. So it's going to be a very interesting dynamic. Now, at the same time, ISIS is, calling its followers to go ahead and perpetrate terror attacks all across Israel and the West. It issued a call for its members to organize attacks in support of Gaza, especially in Europe and the United States, for this Friday, for Quds Day, rather. And so ISIS actually called on supporters to travel to Israel and saying, "We ask Allah to enable you to reach Palestine and to fight the Jews face to face in a religious war." Now, that's what's happening. And along with that, Nasrallah had a speech today, and he's having another speech tomorrow. And in his speech, he said, look, the Operation Al-Aqsa flood has shaken the foundations of the Israeli occupation entity, noting that the Zionist government will fail to cope with its consequences. Now, addressing the Al-Quds platform held annually in support of the Palestinian cause, Nasrallah stressed that the annual event comes this year in light of the Al-Aqsa flood, and highlight the slogan, "Flood of the Free" to issue Al-Quds Day. And so now this is a major thing, and things are getting heightened up. Now, the CIA, there's been multiple rumors. Now, we haven't reported this on Worthy News, but there is rumors all over that the CIA is warning of a mass combined attack of a swarm of drones and cruise missiles that will be launched directly from Iran to strategic sites. Right now, U.S. coalition forces in the Kurdistan region of northern Iraq are reportedly on high alert. Reports indicate that troops have been told to be ready for a ballistic or a cruise missile attack by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran against facilities in and around the city of Erbil, which Iran claims is operated by members of Mossad. Now, at the same time this is all happening, right now the Israeli Air Force is on the highest state of alert, and more reserves have been called up for the air defense system units for Iron Dome, for David Sling, and now all vacation for pilots have been canceled. General Amos Yadin, the former head of Israeli military intelligence, said it appeared that Hezbollah received Iranian orders to open an all-out war on Israel. And that's why Israel decided to call up its reserves. So right now, everything is kind of gearing up for potentially a major escalation of a war coming this week. Now, what I always say to people is, if you really want to know what's happening, instead of a rumor, follow the money. And right now, this is a gold chart. In the last week, and specifically the last few days, gold is shooting straight up, breaking all-time highs. So that gives you a pretty good indication that something is afoot. Now, another thing that kind of happened was that the Temple Institute just issued out a photo of a young Cohen, and a Cohen is like a priest. Now, for those that don't know, I still rent a house in a town called Arad. Now, Arad is in southern Israel, and in our town there's several yeshivas, and the rumors have been throughout our town for years that there were kids that were born whose feet haven't touched the ground. so that they're not defiled. They actually have a whole sect of priests. And the Temple Institute has claimed that there's, a dozen or so priests that are ready. And so it's interesting that they go ahead and they have, just proclaimed that there is now someone ready to stand in to sacrifice a red heifer. Now, kind of getting into it, I want to just talk about the Torah portion this week, because I think the Torah portion is really kind of an indication. So this week's Torah portion, this Friday, will be in Leviticus 9, 1 through 11, Exodus 12, 1 through 20, and the Haftorah portion is Ezekiel 45. Now, the Exodus portion is about the new month. It's talking about, hey, this is the beginning of a new month. This is the month of Nisan. And on the 10th day of this month, you're going to go ahead and you're going to find a lamb. And this is where we get the whole festival of Passover. April 9th, which is only really just a few days away now, is the beginning of Nisan. And I've done this on a different video, but Nisan is known as the month of miracles. It's derived from the Hebrew word nes, which means miracles, and nas, which means escape. And this is really the Jewish people escaping out of Egypt. And so we're entering into new life. We're entering into spring. So all these events that are taking place is all happening. But another very interesting passage that's read is, so you have to understand that what is often not understood is that why the sacrifices were actually made. The sacrifices were really never made for sin. It was always a picture of looking toward the Messiah, toward Yeshua as being the sin sacrifice. And why did they have the sacrifices in the Old Testament times? They're always looking toward. Well, because when God would appear before them, and this is a passage in Leviticus, this is the Torah portion, the reason why that these sacrifices were done for sin offerings is so that people wouldn't die being in the very presence and the very glory of God. This is the thing that the Lord will command you to do, that the glory of the Lord may appear to you. You'll find this also in understanding when Solomon rebuilt the temple, and he did the very first sacrifice. There was 120,000 sheep, and this huge sacrifice that happened. And said, "And the glory of the Lord filled the house." The reason for the sacrifice was so that men wouldn't die. I've kind of talked about this in another video, and you really have to kind of go back to some of my videos, but I suggest to understand a lot more about this, watch the video I did called Red Heifers, the Coming Temple, and the Great Delusion. I really go into why sacrifices are needed and why sacrifices are used. And has nothing to do with denying Yeshua. Yeshua is the final sacrifice. What it has to do is understanding that the world to come, this millennial age that's coming, this next millennial kingdom, the world is still dealing with sin. Now, we as believers will have resurrected bodies. So it's not us dealing with sin, but the world that the Lord is ruling and reigning over for 1,000 years, we still haven't entered into the New Jerusalem yet. And so this is why the sacrifices are mentioned. And I talk about this in a different video. But let's get into it. The same Torah portion that's read about the Passover and why the sacrifices are mentioned also has this very interesting thing about they offered up strange fire. And these are the instance where two of Aaron's sons gave a sacrifice of strange fire, and they actually died. So I think this is kind of interesting as these events are coming out. This is the portion that's being read, and I really hope there's a lot of people that really understand that, hey, there's something going on here. Now, we're at this place, and we have so many convergence of events. I really believe we're at this water-breaking moment in history. With so many events colliding. I mean, you have a comet, they call it the Devil's Comet. At the same time, you have an eclipse coming. At the same time that NASA's going ahead and, propelling rockets into the eclipse, and they named it after an Egyptian serpentine goddess. You have CERN going ahead and doing a reactor, looking for the quote-unquote God particle on the same day of the eclipse. You have the beginning of Nisan next week. You have this whole situation in Israel that's getting ready to explode. You have, it seems like everything is happening this week. It's a convergence. And it's the pressure. It's like when the pressure comes on, we're going to have a water breaking moment. And I know that most people are anticipating something completely different. I'm actually anticipating what God is getting ready to do. And so, for me, we look at the situation and what do we ask? And this is a passage in Joel 2. And it's one of my favorite passages because it goes and it says, and Yud-He-Vav-He shall utter his voice before his army, for his camp is very great. For strong is he who does his word, right? For the day of Yud-He-Vav-He is great and very terrible. Who can stand it? So the question is, who is able to stand, with all this going on? And the Lord says, look, turn to me with all your heart, and with fasting, and with weeping, with mourning, and tear your heart, and not your garments, and turn to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, of great kindness. Who knows if he will return and have pity and leave a blessing behind him? So blow the trumpet in Sion, sanctify a fast, and call a solemn gathering. While Muslims are now ending their fast this week, I think it's actually kind of imperative for us as believers probably to start considering fasting and praying a little differently this week, especially this coming Friday and Saturday. I think it's going to be a very interesting dynamic. April 5th, wake up, pray up, really understand the things that are going on. May even want to start April 4th going into April 5th. There's just a lot of things going on. And finally, I just want to give a big shout out to my wife. Her song Rise Up, which is really just this incredible worship song, just passed 1 million views this week. So it's kind of interesting. It happens while, all these events are happening, and now it's crossed 1 million. So anyway, there's a lot going on. Don't be overwhelmed and don't be consumed with fear. Recognize that you've been called for such a time as this. Recognize that there is a purpose that we're here. And the purpose really is to declare the King is coming. With everything happening, look, just pray up. And if you need to, hey, fast. There's nothing wrong with fast. There's nothing wrong with really, seeking the Lord at this time. So until next time, this is George Whitten with Worthy News.